Hi friends, on my channel, lately sat an asset, your subscription, unlike it very Pomajit channel. If you like the video, do not forget to rate it. Thank you. In 2013 New York City, Christopher Wilson was a photography enthusiast and loved to collect different types of cameras. He was always looking for rare and vintage models on eBay, hoping to find a good deal. One day he saw an ad for a high-end digital camera that he had always wanted to own. The seller claimed the camera was new in the box and had never been used. The price was surprisingly low, only $500, while the original retail price was over $3,000. Christopher thought that was too good to be true, but decided to take a chance and bid. He won the auction and paid for the camera with his credit card. He eagerly waited for the camera to be delivered, but it took longer than expected. The seller said he was shipping the camera from Canada and that there might be some delays due to customs. Christopher checked the tracking number every day, but it wasn't updated for several weeks. He began to worry that he had been scammed and contacted the seller several times, but got no response. He opened a case on eBay and asked for a refund, but the seller ignored his messages. Finally, after 2 months of waiting, Christopher received notice that his package had been delivered. He rushed home from work and found a brown cardboard box on his doorstep. He picked it up and felt a rush of excitement. He opened the box and saw a camera inside. It looked like the real thing, but something was wrong. There were several scratches and dents on the box, and the seal was broken. Christopher opened the box and pulled out the camera. It felt heavy and solid in his hands, but he noticed that it had some dust and fingerprints on it. He turned it on and checked the settings. The camera had already been used. It had over 10,000 clicks of the shutter, which meant someone had taken thousands of pictures. Christopher felt angry and cheated. He had paid for a new camera and received a used one instead. He wondered who the seller was and why he had lied about the camera's condition. He decided to check the memory card and see what pictures the seller had taken. Maybe he could find some clues about his identity or whereabouts. He inserted the memory card into his laptop and opened the image folder. He expected to see landscapes, portraits, or maybe selfies of the salesman. But what he saw made him gasp in horror and disbelief. The pictures were horrifying and disturbing. They depicted scenes of brutal crimes. There were bodies of men and women, mutilated and bloody, lying on filthy mattresses or hanging from hooks on the ceiling. The seller was in some of the pictures, posing with the victims and smiling. Christopher felt sick to his stomach and couldn't believe what he was seeing. He realized that he had unknowingly bought a camera from a mad criminal. Christopher immediately called the police and showed them the pictures. They started an investigation, but the seller had disappeared and left no trace behind. Christopher was worried that the criminal would come after him, as he was now aware of his involvement. He contacted the police again and asked for protection, but they couldn't promise him anything. Christopher had learned a valuable lesson and was traumatized by the experience. He never bought anything online from a stranger again and became more cautious in his dealings with people. He also started a campaign to raise awareness about online scams and the dangers of buying from unknown sellers. He hoped that his story would prevent others from falling victim to similar crimes. In the year 2023, in Los Angeles, Jake was a passionate car enthusiast who loved to collect rare and vintage models. He had a successful online business that allowed him to pursue his hobby and buy cars from all over the world. One day, he saw an ad on eBay for a Ford Mustang, one of his dream cars. The seller claimed that the car was in mint condition and had only one previous owner. Jake was thrilled and contacted the seller, who introduced himself as Tony. Tony said that he was selling the car because he needed money urgently and offered Jake a deal. $100,000 for the car, plus $10,000 for shipping and handling. Jake agreed and paid the money through PayPal. A week later, Jake received a notification that his car had arrived at the nearest port. He drove there eagerly, expecting to see his new treasure. However, when he saw the car, he was shocked and furious. The car was nothing like the one in the pictures. It was rusty, dented, scratched, and missing parts. The engine was leaking oil and the tires were flat. Jake felt like he had been scammed and called Tony immediately. Tony answered and pretended to be surprised by Jake's complaints. He said that the car must have been damaged during transport and that it was not his fault. He refused to give Jake a refund and hung up on him. Jake was outraged and decided to take action. He contacted eBay customer service and reported Tony for fraud. He also filed a complaint with PayPal and asked for a chargeback. He hoped that he could get his money back and expose Tony as a scammer. However, he soon received a threatening text message from Tony, who warned him to drop the case or else he would regret it. Tony said that he had connections with some dangerous people who would come after Jake if he did not back off. Jake ignored the message and called the police instead. He gave them Tony's name, phone number, and address, which he had obtained from PayPal. The police investigated Tony and found out that he was part of a criminal organization that specialized in selling stolen cars online. They raided his house and arrested him and several of his accomplices. They also seized dozens of cars that were reported as missing or stolen. Tony was charged with multiple counts of fraud, theft, and money laundering. He'd face a long prison sentence and a huge fine. Jake was relieved to hear the news and hoped that he would get his money back soon. He also received an apology from eBay and PayPal for their lack of oversight. He felt like justice had been served and decided to forget about the whole ordeal. However, Tony did not forget about Jake. He was furious that Jake had ruined his business and his reputation. He swore revenge on him and contacted some of his associates who were still at large. He hired 2 hitmen to kill Jake and make it look like an accident. Jake had no idea what was coming his way. The next night, Jake woke up to the sound of broken glass. He got out of bed, turned on the lights, and saw 2 masked men in his living room. Before he could react, they attacked him with baseball bats and knives. They hit him on the head, back, and legs, causing him to fall to the ground. They continued to beat him mercilessly, even when he was unconscious. Then they poured gasoline all over the house and set it on fire. It left Jake to die in the flames. Miraculously, Jake survived the brutal attack. A neighbor who had heard the commotion called 911 and the fire department. They arrived on the scene just in time to rescue him from the burning house. They rushed him to the hospital, where he underwent emergency surgery. He had multiple fractures, internal bleeding, severe burns, and smoke inhalation. He was in a critical condition, but the doctors managed to stabilize him. Jake woke up several days later, feeling confused and disoriented. He had no memory of the attack or the fire. He saw his family and friends around him, looking worried and relieved. They told him what had happened and how lucky he was to be alive. They also told him that his house and all of his belongings had been destroyed. He felt devastated and helpless. The police investigated the crime scene and found evidence of arson and assault. They traced the perpetrators to Tony's criminal organization, but they could not find them. They had fled the city and changed their identities. The police put out a nationwide alert for them, but it was too late. They had vanished into thin air. Jake had lost everything he had worked for, his business, his cars, his house, and his health. He felt like a victim of a cruel and senseless crime. He could not understand why someone would want to hurt him so badly. He had never done anything to harm anyone. He had only pursued his passion for cars. He felt like he had been punished for no reason. Jake's life changed forever after that fateful night. He had to start from scratch, rebuilding his business, his home, and his health. He also had to cope with the trauma and the fear of being attacked again. He had nightmares and flashbacks of the assault and the fire. He had to undergo therapy and counseling to deal with his emotional scars. He also had to rely on the support of his loved ones and his community to keep going. In the year 2022, in New York City, Emily was browsing through eBay on her laptop. She was looking for something special to treat herself for her upcoming birthday. She had been working hard as a lawyer for the past few years and felt like she deserved a reward. She stumbled upon a listing for a stunning jewelry set that claimed to be made of diamonds and pearls. The price was surprisingly low, but the seller had a lot of positive feedback and a guarantee of authenticity. Emily was tempted by the offer and decided to buy it without hesitation. She paid with her credit card and waited for the confirmation email. A few days later, she received a package in the mail. She eagerly opened it, hoping to see the sparkling jewels she had ordered. To her horror, she found a cheap plastic necklace and earrings that looked nothing like the pictures on eBay. She felt cheated and angry. She checked the seller's page again and saw that he had changed his name and address. She tried to contact him through the website, but he ignored her messages. She contacted the customer service. They told her that they could not help her because she had paid directly to the seller instead of using PayPal. They advised her to file a complaint with the police. Emily was furious. She did not want to let the scammer get away with it. She did some research online and found out that the address he had used was in New Jersey, not far from where she lived. She decided to confront him in person and demand a refund. She drove to his house the next day, armed with a pepper spray and a camera. She knocked on the door and waited. A man opened the door. He was tall and muscular, with a shaved head and a tattoo on his neck. He looked nothing like the friendly seller she had seen on eBay. He looked at her with a puzzled expression. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm Emily. I bought a jewelry set from you on eBay. You sent me fakes. I want a refund," she said, holding up the plastic necklace and earrings. The man's expression changed from puzzled to hostile. Without warning, he grabbed her by the arm and dragged her into the house. Emily screamed and struggled, but he was too strong. He punched her in the face, knocking her to the ground. He kicked her several times, causing her to black out. When Emily regained consciousness, she found herself in the back seat of a car. She was in pain all over her body and could barely move. The man was driving the car, speeding down the highway. She tried to open the door, but it was locked. She realized that she had been kidnapped. After what felt like hours, the man pulled over on a deserted road. He dragged her out of the car and threw her onto the ground. He got back into the car and drove away, leaving her alone in the middle of nowhere. Emily lay there, bruised and bleeding, until some passers-by found her and called the police. She was taken to the hospital, where she underwent surgery for her injuries. She spent several weeks recovering, both physically and mentally. The incident left her traumatized and afraid. The police launched an investigation and were able to track down the man who had attacked her. He was arrested and charged with kidnapping, assault, and fraud. Emily had to testify in court, which was a difficult and emotional experience. But justice was served in the end, and the man was sentenced to several years in prison. Emily learned a valuable lesson from her ordeal. She realized that she had been too trusting and careless, and that she had put herself in danger by going to the scammer's house alone. She vowed to be more cautious in the future and to never let her guard down again.